Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Driving was tough for many Albertans today as our province was hit by a nasty winter storm. Lethbridge Police concluded their investigation into arches and recommend no criminal charges be laid. And we hear about creative ways churches in England are celebrating the birth of Christ during the pandemic.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge Police have wrapped up their investigation into the alleged misappropriation of $1.5 million in provincial funding at Arches. They say they will recommend that criminal charges not be laid against former employees of the supervised consumption site. Lethbridge Police worked alongside government officials and SES staff. Police say they conducted interviews with Arches staff and were able to find the records for the money in question.
Lethbridge Police Service were able to uncover the records which accounted for the funding in question. The findings have been shared with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, which concludes the involvement of Lethbridge Police Service in the matter.
Initially thought there was inappropriate funds that were misallocated. Through their investigation, they found that, in fact, those funds were located. Yeah, in all fairness, the initial information that was brought forward, these individuals didn't have access to the means that we did, so we wrote production orders to financial institutions, and then through those records, we were able to account for those missing funds.
The findings have been shared with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, which concludes the investigation. There will be changes coming to the Lethbridge Police Commission. The city was notified today that the current commission chair, Simon Griffiths, will be resigning. Officials say a new chair will be appointed sometime in the new year. In a statement, Griffiths had this to say: "I've given a great amount of energy to this position over the last 5 years and feel it is time to move on. I would like to thank my fellow commission colleagues for their efforts and dedication. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of this very important work." Environment Canada issued a winter storm warning earlier today for many parts of Alberta, including right here in Lethbridge. It made for some treacherous driving for many motorists. Plows and sanders were taking care of Priority 1 routes right now. Some regions in the province, especially in the Crow's Nest Pass, saw well over 20 centimeters of the white stuff. Compounding the issue is that much of southwestern Alberta had to also deal with wind gusts up to 80 kilometers an hour, creating snowdrifts. The winter storm warning has ended now. Jeanette Rocher will have full weather details coming up in just a few moments. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer says there's been no detected cases of the new strain of the coronavirus in Canada. Dr. Theresa Tam says so far, Canadian authorities have not discovered any instances of the new variant of the virus that causes COVID-19. The new strain has been spreading across the United Kingdom, leading to widespread travel bans. Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu says the whole research community is trying to determine whether the strain is more of a threat to public health than the more familiar variants. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Deena Hinshaw, says our province is providing a one-time exemption to the gathering limit, but only if you live alone. From December 23rd to the 28th, you can visit another household once. Hinshaw also said that the second shipment of the Pfizer vaccine has arrived and will be offered to healthcare and long-term care workers across the province. That includes 23,350 doses to be delivered. Calgary and Edmonton will each receive 6,825 doses. Red Deer will receive 1,950. As for the South Zone, including Lethbridge, Pincher Creek, Brooks, and Medicine Hat, there will be 975 doses provided for each town or city. Over the past 24 hours, there have been 1,021 new cases of COVID-19 in Alberta, bringing the total number of active cases to 18,311. Fortunately, around 73,300 Albertans have also recovered from the virus. The final tallies are in for the Fill Our Fleet campaign put on by the Alberta Motor Association. The goal this year for the initiative was to raise around $100,000 from food donations for food banks across Alberta, but the final number of over $207,000 far exceeded the main goal.
More than double what the target was, as well as 23,658 pounds of food, which is just, it was incredible. None of us could believe that that's what happened in such a difficult year, but Albertans dug deep into their pantries, deep into their wallets. They came out in the cold to make donations. It was just astounding, the spirit of Albertans to support one another during this difficult time.
Now, if you buy an AMA membership before December 31st, $10 from the amount will go towards the campaign. Christmas to Remember in Lethbridge was a huge success this year. The joint effort by London Drugs and Aged Care Columbia combined to bring joy to seniors who are living in isolation by giving them gifts for the holiday season. Micah Quinn has the details.
800 gifts were given to seniors this year for the Christmas to Remember initiative.
So we were able to gift not only seniors in Lethbridge, but also seniors outside of Lethbridge, so like Coaldale, Colehurst.
Members of the Aged Care Columbia staff distributed gifts today to the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization.
And we had some of our team members go to places in Coaldale on Sunday, in and around Lethbridge. We've kind of been all over. We've been working as little elves trying to get everybody's gifts delivered before Christmas time. So I guess the remaining amount of gifts that we have now to give out are for our own residents at Columbia, which we'll be gifting on the 25th for Christmas time.
Kovacs says that the Christmas to Remember campaign received more gifts than last year, even despite the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think it's just a wonderful thing that seniors are able to see that people are thinking about them and they took the initiative to nominate them and know that they want to have a wonderful Christmas, that somebody is thinking about them. And it's very lonely this time of year, let alone during the whole pandemic, but it's just so important. And it's just very heartwarming to see that people have took time out of their day to nominate a senior and then went out and got a gift.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
When it comes to believing in God, many people still do, according to a recent study released by the University of Lethbridge sociologist Dr. Reginald Bibby. Bibby says his research discovered that 60% of Canadians continue to believe in God and only 15% say they definitely do not. Bibby says the belief in God is still widespread across Canada. He says belief in our Heavenly Father is slightly higher in Saskatchewan and the Atlantic provinces. His survey finds that 25% of Canadians are pro-religious, 45% are low religious, and 30% are not religious at all. The latest survey was conducted in partnership with Andrew Grenville and Maru Blue Research using a representative online sample of just over 3,000 people. Being a disciple in the workplace can be very challenging. Now that's according to author David Gill, who wrote a book called Workplace Discipleship 101. David says in today's society, there are a number of challenges Christians face in the workplace today on being an effective disciple.
Certainly technology is a great challenge. Globalization means we're competing with workers from all over the world, and sometimes that creates disruptions. But of course, COVID is the latest thing, and this is a massive disruption where some people have lost their jobs, and most of the rest of us are working much more from home. So that's a huge challenge these days. But I would actually say, Hal, the biggest challenge of all is the fact that Christians haven't thought enough about this, and we don't really know what it means for Jesus to be Lord of our work.
Catch the full interview with David Gill, author of Workplace Discipleship 101, coming up later in our newscast. The Calgary Stampede says its CEO Warren Connell has died. Connell joined the Stampede in 1984 and became its CEO in 2015. Among his accomplishments include setting the direction for the final fulfillment of the Stampede's 20-year master plan. The organization says President Board Chair Dana Pierce will be tasked with the supervision and direction of the Stampede's new executive team. Top doctors in Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg will not say if they will recommend approval of proposed plans for a 2021 season where teams could play on home ice in the NHL. The league wants to play in the arenas of participating clubs beginning January 13th, but is prepared to hold them in a neutral site if necessary. Dr. Jas Atwal, Manitoba's acting Deputy Chief Provincial Health Officer, says officials there are going over the proposal to evaluate health risks. Meanwhile, here in Alberta, Dr. Dean Henshaw is only saying that it would be critical for moving forward that public health is protected. Meanwhile, BC's Health Minister Adrian Dix says his province is examining a plan for the NHL to start the season. He says the infection rate in BC is different now than it was in the summer.
Our public health officers across the country are reviewing that. All of the medical health officers, there's obviously those from Quebec and Ontario, from Manitoba, from Alberta, and from BC, and they'll be looking at these proposals. They are obviously significantly different from what was presented in the summer. The plan, which was a bubble in the summer, which occurred during a time of relatively low COVID-19 caseloads in Canada and in North America. So they're taking a different step, shall we say, maybe say a step back from that, and that's something to be reviewed. But it's important that we do what we always do here in BC, and I think all the medical health officers across the country take a look at that, and then we'll make some decisions in the days to come as to whether the plan meets the needs of people.
BC's top doctor says COVID-19 immunization is expanding this week, with every regional health authority now having received doses of Pfizer's vaccine. Dr. Bonnie Henry says the vaccine must be stored at ultra-low temperatures, and right now the company requires doses to be given at points of arrival. People receiving it must travel to a central location. Henry says she is looking to see how the vaccine can be delivered more widely. She says residents of long-term care homes are a top priority. A new provincial regulation in Saskatchewan will not allow novice drivers from driving right-hand drive vehicles. Saskatchewan government insurance officials say it's in response to a collision last spring when a young driver of a right-hand drive vehicle attempted to pass the vehicle in front of him, killing 2 people. Experts say the main safety concern with right-hand drive vehicles is the limited visibility when passing, and newer drivers lack experience for that. A report says there are now around 400 registered right-hand drive vehicles in Saskatchewan. As of today, none of them are registered to any new or novice drivers. There are signs of improvement in Manitoba's efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19. The province's key infection numbers dropped to their lowest levels in weeks yesterday, with 167 new cases and 4 deaths. It comes more than a month after restrictions were tightened on public gatherings and business openings. Hospitalization rates remain stable, but the demand for intensive care beds remain well above normal. With several days to go before lockdown restrictions begin, Ontario is reporting 2,202 cases of COVID-19 today. Another 21 people have died. Ontario will go into lockdown on Saturday as cases continue to soar in many regions. The lockdown will close all non-essential businesses and ban outdoor gatherings while extending the winter break for schools by a week. In the United States, Congress passed its very large pandemic relief package. Many believe this new bill will finally deliver long sought-after cash to businesses and individuals, along with the resources to vaccinate the country. The bill now goes to U.S. President Donald Trump.
If we're going to have safely enter the economy and our schools, we must crush the virus. I have hope because of the virus. That's why we could support this bill.
We have big wins in this package to help us defeat the virus once and for all, with billions more in funding for vaccines, testing, distribution, and more.
On this vote, the yeas are 359, the nays are 53.
It is a rite of passage many presidents in the United States have taken over the years in their pilgrimage to the White House, where to worship with other people. As we hear in this next report, there's a power of seeing a U.S. president in the pews.
The president will be remembered a lot longer than most of the rest of us. But what really matters is the good you have done, because that will continue forever.
Reverend J. Philip Wogeman says a church pew is a great equalizer.
We had homeless people in the church. We had a lot of very ordinary people. There were some other government officials of one kind or another, and now here comes the President of the United States. In church, we were just all part of the congregation.
Wisdom learned from pastoring former President Bill Clinton at Foundry United Methodist Church, a short walk from the White House.
It's only a mile from the White House. I had no inkling, whatever, that the first family would arrive there.
He says a sanctuary is safe haven, one of the last places where President-elect Joe Biden can try to blend in when he takes office next month. D.C. has seen decades of heads of state making time for the divine. Half a dozen churches of Catholic, Presbyterian, Episcopal, and African Methodist Episcopal faiths sit within a mile of the president's residence.
The president's words to take a nation to war, bring peace.
As vice president, Biden attended Holy Trinity Catholic Church. As a past spiritual confidant for a chief of state, Wogeman says there are timeless biblical truths that resonate even today.
And especially now. Love does not insist on its own way. Love is not arrogant or rude. Love is patient and kind.
And that no matter where the president-elect chooses to worship, the act of attending service might remind him to serve higher purpose.
And for a president to recognize that God is beyond all time and space, is greater than any of us, even if you're President of the United States.
Hillary Powell, The Associated Press.
Many churches in Canada have turned to hosting drive-in services during the COVID-19 pandemic. That seems to also be a theme in England, where certain churches there hosted a drive-in Christmas carol service at a supermarket parking lot. As we hear in this next story, churches in the UK are finding creative ways to celebrate the birth of Jesus.
As lockdown restrictions force UK churches to find creative ways to share the Christmas message during the festive season, one congregation in the north of England was overwhelmed when they literally had to turn people away from their community drive-in carol service. Last weekend, New Life Church in Congleton saw 500 people pull into their local supermarket car park to celebrate Christmas. Full to capacity, sadly they were unable to accommodate the additional 50 people who had turned up. Those joining in from their cars were treated to a brass band leading them in carols, as well as Bible readings from local church and civic leaders and some drama. The service concluded with a gospel message from evangelist and founder of the Message Trust, Andy Hawthorne.
The Christian church is growing faster than ever. More people are going to follow Jesus this year than ever before in the history of the church. Let's celebrate. Let's share the good news of great joy for all people.
So as many churches like these find unique ways to celebrate the birth of Christ in the midst of such challenging times, it's hoped that many will accept the greatest gift of Jesus this year. Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
Yes, the greatest gift of all. So nice to see. We had quite the storm here in southwestern Alberta today. Environment Canada issued a winter storm warning earlier. It's ended now, but some regions of the province received up to 50 centimeters of the white stuff. When will we see a reprieve in our region? Details are coming up next. Environment Canada issued a winter storm warning earlier today. Fortunately, it's ended now. We had lots of snow and blowing snow in many parts of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Roche is here now with an extended look at the forecast. Jeanette, it looks like we'll be getting our white Christmas after all.
Yeah, well, it is beginning to look a lot more like Christmas, isn't it? As we had that winter storm warning in effect for much of today, but into tonight, we're only going to see another 30% chance of that white stuff, and then it should be gone at least until Boxing Day. -11 is the overnight low. We could get 50K winds. Tomorrow, though, high of 0 could feel more like -19 in the morning with that wind chill. Sunshine expected tomorrow. Also some 50K wind gusts as well. Into Thursday, that would be Christmas Eve, a high of 7 degrees and sunshine. 7 degrees for Christmas Day with a mix of sun and cloud. And then Boxing Day, we could get a chance of flurries as well when the temperature's going to drop a bit there to -7. -2 expected on Sunday and Monday. -1. So the almanac tells us average high for this time of year, -1, -13 the average low. 14 degrees was the high temperature. That was back in 1994, and our lowest day on record was -32. That was in 1983. Sun rose this morning at 8:27 a.m. Sunset today, 4:34 p.m. as we did reach our shortest day of the year yesterday, meaning today will be about 1 minute longer of daylight than it was yesterday. Beautiful sunshine expected on the west coast tomorrow. 5 degrees the expected high in Victoria, 4 in Vancouver, -2 the high in Edmonton tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. 0 degrees expected to be the high in Calgary under sunny skies. Calgary, of course, experienced some winter storm weather as well earlier today. That should be tapering off though. -15 the expected high tomorrow in Saskatoon, -12 in Regina, -17. Chilly conditions over in Winnipeg, also chance of flurries. Keep in mind those temperatures could appear a little bit colder with the wind chill. Over in Toronto, chance of flurries, high of 8 degrees, 0 is the high in Ottawa, also with a chance of flurries. These two cities, Ottawa and Toronto, expecting a risk of freezing rain tomorrow as well. -2 the expected high in Montreal, and they could also see the white stuff as well. Fredericton, lots of sunshine, -5 could fall to -8 though by the afternoon. Halifax, a chance of flurries, -1 is the high, -2 in Charlottetown with a 30% chance of flurries there. 40% chance of showers expected in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 2 degrees. There you go, that is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Runner's Soul, Lethbridge and Southern Alberta's sole specialty running and walking store.
Cenovus Energy says it has the key regulatory approvals in place to go ahead with its friendly takeover of rival Husky Energy. The all-shares deal was approved by shareholders of both companies last week. The offer was valued at $3.8 billion when it was announced last October. The companies have said the combination is expected to create $1.2 billion in savings. Some of that, however, will be achieved by cutting up to 25% of its workforce. The Canada Revenue Agency says it is launching a website to help Canadians track which employers have been using government wage subsidies during the COVID-19 pandemic. The CRA says its Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Registry is part of a push for more transparency. The announcement notes that the agency has a separate web page for people to report businesses who wrongfully claimed a subsidy. Ottawa says around $54 billion in wage subsidy payments have protected close to 4 million jobs across the country. Google is pushing back on antitrust claims brought against it by the U.S. Justice Department. In a legal filing, the tech giant denies or partially rejects almost 200 specific complaints against it. The company says people use its search engine because they choose to, not because they're forced to. The Justice Department has sued Google for abusing its dominance in online search and advertising. A judge has set a tentative trial date of September of 2023. Clothing stores and specialty retailers are offering huge discounts and are heavily promoting curbside pickup in hopes of rescuing a lackluster holiday shopping season. For some, it could be their last chance of survival. The holiday season, which accounts for around 20% of retail industry's annual sales in North America, have always been make or break for struggling stores. Now, it's even more important this year as they look to make up for sales lost since the pandemic forced them to temporarily close many of their doors at their locations. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 51 points on the day to finish at 17,552. The Dow was down 200 points to 30,015. The S&P 500 was down 7 points to 3687, and the Nasdaq was up 65 points on the day to 12,807. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.17 to $46.80 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to $2.77 US. Gold was down 30 cents to $18.60.54 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $25.20 US an ounce. Wheat is at $273 per metric ton, barley's at $275, canola's at $6.39, and corn is at $295 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.20 to $113.45. Feeder cattle were down 73 cents to $139.90, and lean hogs were up 10 cents to $66.03. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 77.47 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge police are not recommending criminal charges be laid following an investigation into the allegations of the misappropriation of $1.5 million in provincial dollars at Arches and the supervised consumption site. Through a thorough investigation, police say they were able to uncover records which accounted for the money in question. PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. It's affected so many our police officers, and even our veterans. Coming up, a powerful segment produced by our very own video journalist, Loris Alexander, showing the struggles many have with PTSD on a daily basis. That BCN exclusive is coming up in just a moment.
During my time in the military in 1992, in order for me to go to Somalia, I was prescribed mefloquine, which is an anti-malarial drug that was given soldiers of that era, in fact, until very recently. I had a severe reaction to it, as did many others. A lot of the fallout from that mimics PTSD, and for the longest time, I was treated for depression extensively, involved hospitalizations. I had 17 ECTs. Not a happy time in my life. I now recognize that most of that unhappiness was probably caused due to me being poisoned by this drug.
veterans that spent their whole career in the military, civilian life is completely alien. It's completely alien. Like, I mean, I didn't do a whole career, but you know, you don't know how to act. You don't know how to do anything. You don't know how do I get a job, right? Like they don't teach in the military how to get a job. You already have one, and it's weird. Like, there's nothing transferable. It's not like you get a job at a supermarket. They go, okay, I want you to go and shoot everybody in aisle 6, right? It's just not. It's so weird, right? So I think there's a lot of that, is that we don't actually know how to live in the real world.
Willie, you take a great. You take a really good.
He's looking for his blanket too.
Wow. Let's get him home.
I love the brotherhood. I love the teamwork, the camaraderie, and everything that went along with it. I was excelling in my career, you know, being advanced promoted, and then in the blink of an eye, in one accident, it was career-ending. The kind of way I look at it now is in comparison, is kind of like today with tattoos. Every single person you run into today has a tattoo, versus if you go 40 years ago and somebody had a tattoo, you know, they're categorized or looked frowned upon as a bad guy or a motorcycle guy or a military guy, and that was that stigma around it. I mean, everybody today, from young youth to grandmothers to everybody has, and we managed to get through that stigma of tattoos, and this is no different, right? If we can educate people in PTSD and support our veterans that were willing to put their life on the line. Sir.
A lot of us are quite damaged, and you know that they know what it's about, as opposed to, you know, other people can read about it and stuff like that, but they don't really know. So that's a huge thing, and so you feel like you're coming home.
Grown men with blankies. Our security blankets, right?
My Wooby is upstairs. I can go get that if you want to.
The community is a really loving community. Every club I've ever met, right across the country, there's a lot of misconceptions about what we stand for. You choose this life. You choose to wear a patch, in our case, a patch. And when you make that commitment, there are minimum standards that everybody has to, whether they're white, brown, black, yellow, they have to adhere to these minimum standards of being, we have a code of conduct. So if you can show that you are worthy of that patch, then you join, you are accepted. I can remember when I was a child, in the back of my mom and dad's station wagon, with my brother, we were playing, and in the distance we could hear this rumble. It started off as a faint rumble, and then as it approached, we could feel we could feel the vibration, and they were like Vikings out of the midst. They were scary, they were big, and they roared by us, and me and my brother were scared to our bones. My dad held steady, my mom held steady, and they were louder than ever, and I was scared. And when they looked at me, one guy looked at me and he just scowled and kept going. And I remember that experience for my whole life, how I was scared. And when my friend Kerry bought a motorcycle, he turned me on a random motorcycle, a Harley of all bikes. Now when I see a young child, I'll ride by and I'll remember how I was scared. And anyway. Because no child should be scared like that.
I was just in a bad place, really bad place. And I had met Sandra previous to that because she was looking to start up a veterans program, and she had talked to me, and I had come out to the ranch and, you know, given her my 2 cents and thought, you know, what she was doing was absolutely fabulous, and to go for it. I encouraged her. And so here I was the next day after my episode, sitting on my couch contemplating suicide because I was just in a really bad place, and I was spiraling down fast, and I was thinking suicide. And I had been in that dark place before, and I didn't want to go there, and I knew where I was going. And I get a phone call from Sandra right out of the blue. She just called me, and she said, "Diane, would you like to do the program?"
About 10% of veterans suffer with PTSD, and often PTSD leads to suicide, and we did lose 40 veterans last year to suicide, most likely related to PTSD. So I combine equine-assisted therapy with mindfulness-based therapies for the treatment of trauma. Wondering any other symptoms? You mentioned the dreams, the flashbacks.
Sandra had already been working with veterans, and then when I met Sandra and we became a couple, we decided that with my knowledge of the military, that this was the route to go to helping veterans. My wife had a passion and seeing how many veterans fell through the cracks, and it's still happening today. Even my own Veteran Affairs case took almost 3 decades to be resolved. So we look at people and we try to get them before they fall through the cracks, and hopefully we can save a life or two or make people's lives a lot better.
I think the thing that draws most everybody into it, whether it's the MC, the commandos, or one of the RCs or anything like that, or any social group like that, it's the feeling of what you missed when you left the military. So we have, within this group, like we're spread out across Canada, but everybody that's in our group, the commando group, is either, most of them are ex-military, but we still have some serving. But there's that sense of filling that void that you lost when you left the military. So as I joined the group, right, we've all basically experienced the same thing. We understand each other. We've been through the same ideas, but the same events at different capacities. And you know, it's basically, yeah, filling a void and filling something that's missing when you left the structure when you left the military.
I think the commitment is a lot of it's to do with the camaraderie that we experienced when we were in the military, and probably a common theme there, but it's quite true. And we don't care if a person was a private or a colonel. We don't care if he was Army, Navy, Air Force. We don't care if you served in a combat zone, jumped out of an airplane, or rode around in a truck. It doesn't matter to us. It's the club. We put our club first, and by putting our club first, we're actually putting each other first.
A large part of it is for me, was the coast-to-coast networking. So, you know, when I sent a text, if someone made a phone call, there was someone on the other end of that line to pick it up, no matter what. And that was a main thing for me, and I think we've accomplished that.
One of the things is the misconceptions of motorcycle clubs, and that is a big thing. You know, we're in a big community. It's not just our club, and some of the best guys you'll ever meet are guys that ride bikes. You know, they're just because they got long hair. I was in the military, had short hair, and people treated you differently. You know, you're clean cut or whatever, but that doesn't change you as a person. You know, so and you know, like for example, say one of the guys from another club dies. Well, the clubs come together and go there, you know, and you know, support the family, maybe give them money, or even that just the support. And you know, how bike guys in the motorcycle community are treated, it's a big, it's wrong actually. So in some, you know, where people can't go to bars, or you know, because of the colors they're wearing, or if people in Canada don't see what's going on right now, it could happen to them. And it doesn't, you know, just because I wear a leather jacket and have long hair, it doesn't mean that I'm bad. You know, in actual fact, most of the guys that are, they're actually more true than people that are clean cut, because they're going to be there to help you if your bike's broke down or your car. And you know, and if you went to a neighborhood where I'll just use our club for an example, where our guys live, they'll shovel people's walks for them. You know, they're friendly. They'll open the door for, you know, people or whatever, you know, and I think sometimes when the laws are made, they better look at themselves, because sooner or later you're not, you know, because you're wearing a certain jacket or whatever, you're not going to be allowed to do things. And you know, we fought, everybody in our club was a veteran, so you know, the reason they joined the military is for freedom and stuff, and freedom of speech, and you know, not be discriminated against. Well, you know, I think personally, I think it's wrong that just because you ride a motorcycle, or you know, you have friends that ride motorcycles, well, we could look at any organization, but like our club, I can tell you, you know, there's some discrimination against our club, and our club's never had even anybody drunk driving. So because we look a certain way, it's not right. You know, that's my big thing.
Many misconceptions of bikers and the way people look, but I always say it like this: talk with your hands. Let your actions decide the opinions of others. This brotherhood that I'm in, you know, carries more leverage than any drug or alcohol could ever help anybody with. You know, this brotherhood creates opportunities for so many people. You know, if we can give back to people and change people's lives, we've already won. You know, those are the fundamentals of this club. You know, like-minded people dealing with like-minded situations, real life situations.
Is there any incidents or events in your life that have taken place that you like lean on your brothers in this motorcycle club for?
Yep. I've got I'm battling ALS, and my brothers are here for me, and that's what counts. It's simple, that you know, besides my wife, my brothers are here, and that's what counts. That's what we lean on each other for. Sorry, that's a fact of life, and that's part of it. You know, we have fun, we go riding, we do our things, we help out in that. It's being here for each other. That's what counts.
Last national rally, I had 2, 3, 4 people in the club come up to me and say how the club has saved their lives. You know, and again, that's a hard response. And I mean, that's in itself is so humbling. You know, as a founder, you know, that's exactly what it was meant for, this club. You know, that sort of connection, and like I said before, the networking and just the support between members. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it before from other members on here, but the support amongst the members for each other is second to none.
COVID-19 has not only impacted our health, but also disrupted relationships and businesses. Our guest today believes that now is the time to see the workplace not just as a paycheck, but as a place to demonstrate truth and the reality of faith. But how do we do this when our world is so hostile right now to Christian values, or appeared hostility? David Gill is the author of 9 books, one of which we're featuring today called Workplace Discipleship 101, and he joins me now from Oakland, California via Skype. David, welcome to Bridge City News.
It's great to be with you.
Now, you start out by distinguishing between the workplace and the marketplace. What's the real difference here?
Well, what I'm really interested in is what does our faith, what does our confession that Jesus is Lord mean for our work? Okay, and a lot of things have been written about this. It's kind of a movement of the last 30 or 40 years. Some of the literature talks about marketplace ministry, and some of it talks about theology of work and that kind of thing. I prefer talking about workplace discipleship because marketplace puts the emphasis on the exchange, buying and selling, exchanging, trading, and that is important work. We want Jesus to be Lord of our market activities, but there are a lot of things in the workplace that are, for example, raising children, that's not a matter of the marketplace. It's a matter of us exerting ourselves to try to deliver products and services that glorify God. So I view everybody works. Some of them work in marketing. A lot of times we hope we get paid for our work, but just being paid doesn't make it work. Work is where we put out an effort to create products and services that glorify God and meet the needs and sometimes the wants of people, of our neighbors and people around us.
So what are some of the major challenges people face in today's world in being a workplace disciple?
Well, I think, externally speaking, of course, the rise of technology and robots and artificial intelligence, this is displacing some traditional work. People are losing jobs in manufacturing because robots are taking over, but that's also true in medicine and a lot of other fields as well. So certainly technology is a great challenge. Globalization means we're competing with workers from all over the world, and sometimes that creates disruptions. But of course, COVID is the latest thing, and this is a massive disruption where some people have lost their jobs, and most of the rest of us are working much more from home. So that's a huge challenge these days. But I would actually say, Hal, the biggest challenge of all is the fact that Christians haven't thought enough about this, and we don't really know what it means for Jesus to be Lord of our work. We're not seeing the lessons of Scripture. And, I often say Jesus had more to say about money, property, and wealth than he did about heaven and hell and a whole lot of other subjects that are very important, but still we tend to neglect and overlook, and we don't, and a lot of times our pastors aren't really prepared by their seminary or Bible school backgrounds to see those lessons, and often our pastors don't have any experience working out in workplaces outside of church turf.
Now you list 5 steps that believers need to prepare themselves in order to be most effective in the workplace. Name some of those steps.
Well, the first step is to make the commitment, because I think just like almost anything, getting fit, for example, it's not going to happen if we approach it randomly and say, well, I better get fit this year. No, we've got to actually make a commitment, share that with others who will hold us accountable and support us. So making the commitment, I think, is the first thing to say, I am going to commit myself to honoring Jesus Christ in my work. Secondly, it's learning how to connect our work with our prayer life. I talk about how we're really good at emergency prayers about our work. Lord, I'm about to get fired, or Lord, they're harassing me at work, or something like that. But we need to be more proactive in our prayer life, where we pray for guidance and strength before we go to work, and in a more holistic, anticipatory way, not just throwing up our crisis prayers to the Lord. The third step is to listen. So prayer is talking to God in a simple sense, but reading Scripture is listening to God. So I have a chapter about how to read our Bibles, looking for those workplace lessons. A fourth step is partnering, creating what I call a posse. It's not good for man to dwell alone. Jesus sent his disciples out 2 by 2. We need to have partners who are praying with us and supporting us. So I feel like individualism is a great enemy, really, that undermines our capacity to honor Christ in the workplace. We need prayer partners, people who understand our work, and we can share what's going on with them. And then the fifth step is what I call lifelong learning, where we as disciples of Christ, we want to get better at our jobs. So we want to study in order to be as good as we can be, deliver excellence at work. But it's also about wisdom. So much of the knowledge and information in the world today is bits and pieces of breaking news and opinions and things like this. We need a deeper kind of wisdom that comes out of Scripture, but also comes, I recommend reading more history of our profession. For example, history and stories of Christian leaders who we can learn from. So there's a whole agenda that I describe in my 5th step there of preparation to deepen our knowledge base and, above all, our wisdom base.
Now, you refer to workplace discipleship as very hard work. Why is that?
Well, any kind of discipleship is going to have challenges. In this world, you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I've overcome this world. And we know the most faithful disciples in history. Well, first of all, our Lord, he was perfect in his work. He did the work of his Father. You know, before Jesus went to the cross, he prayed in his prayer and said, Father, I've glorified you by finishing the work that you gave me to do. And then he did the work on the cross. So there's always going to be a bearing of the cross. There will be some opposition there. We live in a fallen, broken world. And so to say, I want to follow Jesus Christ, as you said at the very beginning, there may be some opposition from people that we work with or from our bosses, but there's also just exhaustion and complexity and all of these things. But what I always say is, you know, it may be hard, but it's much better to have Jesus walking with us through the valley of the shadow of death than to walk through it by ourselves. So even in the worst of circumstances, this is a great way to live, is to take our Lord and our faith to work with us.
And I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort
Absolutely.
me. Now, David, you
Absolutely.
say we need to focus on the character and mission of God. How would you define that?
I do. Well, because I think that what I talk about is alignment. The first challenge is to try to do our work in alignment with the work that God is already doing in the world. And so, and part of that is because we're challenged to walk in the ways of the Lord. I mean, in the Old Testament and New Testament, we're to follow after Jesus Christ. And so his agenda becomes our agenda. We're not God, but we do have the Spirit of God empowering us to do the work of the Lord. I also think from another perspective, we're all made in the image and likeness of God. And we follow a working God as well as a resting God. And so God's work is the primary model for what we want to accomplish in the workplace. So what is that? If we want 2 words, God is the creator and the redeemer. So we want in our work, whether it's in manufacturing or raising our children or being an artist, whatever it is, we want to do what results in the creation and, you might say, the production of things that God could call good, things that are good for food, but also pleasing to the eye. So we want to study God's work as creator and then align our work as much as possible to bear witness to that creation. But God doesn't just create good things, he fixes bad things. That's where the Redeemer comes in. God is the healer of the hurting, not just the creator of initial life, but the healer of hurting life. And so we want to be creative. We want to be redemptive. But also there are other images, like God is the sustainer. So I'm saying wherever we are, wherever we work, we want to sustain the people around us, help hold them up when they're falling down. And also our business. We want to help sustain our business. We want to stand behind the products that we deliver, because God doesn't just create something and walk away. He sustains what he's made. And so we want to be creators and sustainers and redeemers. And I also, in my chapter, allude to the fact that God is also the source of wisdom. He is wisdom. And we want to be the kind of people who bring wisdom to the workplace. And God is righteousness. And so we want to be people like the prophets call for. We want to be people who stand up for justice and for fairness. If somebody's being mistreated, if our customers are getting something that's not what we promised, we want to be people who stand up for what's right and what's just. And then the 6th characteristic is God is the finisher, not just the Alpha, but the Omega. God finishes the work that he's begun in us and in the world. So we want to be the kind of people who follow through in our work and finish and bring excellence and glory to God. So that's what I mean by the character of God becomes our basic philosophy of what makes for good work. Faithful to the ways of God.
So if you put it in a baseball analogy, God's not only the starting pitcher, but he's the closer as well in the game of life here. So David, why do you believe that accountability is vital to us as believers?
Well, we're accountable to God, first of all. We'll give an answer for how we live our lives. We believe in that from day to day, but also from the eternal perspective. You know, we're going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account. So I think that accountability is important. But we also need to be accountable to other people in our lives, you know, people who are men and women of God who can hold us accountable. And we need to invite that accountability. We don't just want a posse of people who will always just praise us for whatever we do. And we want people who love us enough to say, look, I think you shouldn't go in this direction, or we share a problem and they could say, you know, I wouldn't go this direction. And so it's on that level too, accountability to God, but also to others around us.
Now, there's a vast difference between available information at our fingertips and wisdom needed to really understand it. David, how can we really develop discernment when it comes to the two?
Well, you know, I think, first of all, the fear of the Lord's the beginning of wisdom. So that is going to be the basis. My father was a mid-level accounting executive all of his life, and he didn't go to seminary, or he actually didn't even go to college. But my dad read Proverbs every morning of his life. You know, there are 31 chapters. So every day my dad read a different chapter of Proverbs every day, all of his life. And I think, you know, that's where the wisdom comes from, you know, common sense, you might say, which is not so common. But so I think the wisdom comes there, but also it comes from from perspective. You know, wisdom is from perspective, not getting lost in the details, but seeing, not just seeing the trees, but seeing the forest. And so the Bible helps us develop this kind of wisdom. It's practical knowledge and discernment. And then, of course, I also think it's from our posse, because, you know, in Romans, I love this, chapter 12, where Paul says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And then he immediately says, but don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but think soberly. You have one gift, but you don't have them all. So we need that community in order to figure out what is the will of God. What is that good and acceptable and perfect thing to do in my work? I need others. I can't think more highly of just my own self than I ought to.
David, what's a good biblical insight that almost anyone can share in a secular workplace? Think of one maybe right on the top of your head.
Well, servant leadership. I mean, this is something Jesus taught. You know, people in the world love to lord it over others, but I'm your Lord, and I don't do that. I'm among you as one who serves. And we're challenged to think not how to impose our leadership and lean on people like that, like a dictator or something, but instead we're here to serve people. So yes, we do need to assert leadership in the sense of holding people accountable who are working for us, or our kids as they're growing up. But we want to do it as servants. We're really here to serve God and actually to serve others as well. So that's one thing. I think this community thing is also taught from cover to cover in the Bible, that it's not good for one to dwell alone, man or woman to dwell alone. We need others. David and Jonathan made a covenant. Ruth and Naomi made a covenant to support each other. Jesus sent his disciples out 2 by 2. So I would always argue in any workplace where I am on behalf of a collaboration and teamwork, and not just doing things all by ourselves. So there is individual responsibility and capability, but we're much stronger if we always stress the importance of teams. And I would do that in my secular workplace, you could say. I wouldn't necessarily quote the Bible initially. I'd tell them later on, if people ask, well, why are you so strong on teams? I would probably say, well, it comes out of my faith. But I would promote that anywhere, on a faculty or anywhere.
David, we have about 30 seconds left in the interview here. Can you suggest quickly a way to handle workplace conflict?
Well, I love the Beatitudes as a model for our own character, which can be applied to handling conflict. So the point of the whole thing is really, I think, in number 7, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. We want people to have peace with God, but peace with each other as well. Now, how do we get there? I think the Beatitudes are a progression. So it begins in being poor in spirit. We'll never be able to help people overcome conflict if they won't be humble and say, we're messed up. We need to work at this. And then from being poor in spirit goes lamenting that poverty and brokenness. Blessed are those who mourn, being meek and gentle, not trying to be the control freak in the situation, and then pursuing what is just and righteous and true. We've got to do that, but we won't see that justice if we don't start out in openness and humility. If we just plunge in and search for justice immediately without that openness, I don't think we'll get there. But justice must be accompanied by mercy, the fifth beatitude, and purity of heart, integrity, if we want to get to number 7, which is to be a peacemaker. We never look more like the children of God than when we are peacemakers. Those who are peacemakers will be called the children of God. And then number 8 is, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And this is the realism end of the Beatitude, saying even if you work this way and try to resolve conflicts, it's not always going to work. And sometimes people are going to attack you and accuse you of bad faith, but hang in there. Keep working on God's righteousness agenda.
Some solid insight and wisdom. David Gill, author of Workplace Discipleship 101, thanks for joining me today from Oakland, California.
It's great to be with you, Hal. Thanks so much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.